Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert were selected back-to-back in the 2020 NFL Draft. While Tua was struggling in his first two seasons, Herbert quickly became a popular choice as one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. Both fans and media members alike went back and forth about which quarterback is better, and a debate that could culminate in a matchup that breaks what's left of Twitter. Today, we'll be bringing on Arjun Menon to talk about Tua, Herbert, and Dolphins Chargers Sunday Night Football. Everybody, please welcome Arjun. Arjun, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Hussam. Appreciate you having me on. Pretty excited for this game on Sunday, even though I kind of don't think it's going to work out in my favor, but pretty excited to talk about it in general.
We'll get to that a little bit later. But what are some of the things you're seeing from the Chargers this season? Obviously, they had playoffs hopes, Super Bowl hopes. They had Joey Bosa. They brought in Khalil Mack. Derwin James was finally healthy as well. But you guys are what I believe 6-6 now.
Yeah, I think I don't want to paint injuries as the big story of the Charger season, but it has kind of like hampered them in certain spots, and it's going to be a big spot. Our injuries are going to hamper them again going into this week. The Chargers defense is built around pretty much one player, and that's Derwin James, and he's most likely going to be out for this game against the Dolphins. I think overall coming into this week, though, the Chargers have not looked good at all in recent weeks, losing to the Raiders, who we just embarrassed, like who just lost in one of the most embarrassing ways we've seen this whole NFL season against the Rams. Is like I don't know how to really like take them that serious. The Chargers right now have a worse point differential than the Panthers and the Falcons, which again, that's not for a team that was as high as third in odds to win the AFC. Like that's just like very surprising. It's not something I was expecting. So the Chargers season overall has kind of been on a has been like downward trending, and now they get a Dolphins team which has admittedly been one of the better teams, especially better offenses in the league so far this year.
Of course, we'll get into both offenses a little bit, but I mean the big story of Sunday Night Football is obviously Tua and Justin Herbert as well. Even with the inconsistent coaching from Brandon Staley, a beat up offensive line, a rib injury, Justin Herbert's still putting up big numbers. He's throwing for almost 3,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions while completing 67% of his passes. The season hasn't gone the way the Chargers wanted, and Staley maybe could be on the hot seat with some of his defensive play calling as well. If the season ended today, the Chargers would be ninth in the AFC and out of the playoffs. Now, as you say, injuries are not an excuse, but what is going on with Justin Herbert and the offense overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think overall, I think Herbert's been fine. Honestly, like I don't think he's been that bad of a quarterback. And when you look, I know you were an analytics user. I know you're familiar with EPA and like CPOE and PFF stuff. Like he hasn't looked good in the efficiency metrics that typically correlate to winning. And so I think since last year he has gotten a bit worse per his stats, but I don't think his stats getting worse are an indication that he's gotten worse as a quarterback or he's regressed, because in areas where he can control, which is his turnover worthy play rate, which is kind of one of the better ways we can measure QB decision making. He has the best in the league. He doesn't turn pressures into sacks very often. He has the third lowest pressure to sack ratio in the league. He's been pretty accurate per PFF's charting. He ranks top 8 in terms of balls deemed as accurate. He's not inaccurate because he ranks in the bottom 9 in bottom 9, meaning the lowest percentage of passes charted as inaccurate. So overall, this Chargers offense isn't a Justin Herbert problem. It's an everything else problem. And you can classify that as the offensive line allowing the most pressures of any offensive line in the league this year. The receivers that, it's not like a drops problem. It's a getting open problem where, number one, they don't have any speed on their receiving room. Every receiver runs a sub 4.45, a 40-yard dash. And that ultimately like eliminates the possibility of the deep passing game, which the Dolphins have kind of opened up the field a lot this year, given Waddle, Tyreek. And so the Chargers don't have that. So it's been a rocky kind of season for the Chargers offense, marred by inconsistency. And I don't typically talk bad on coaching and anything just because I need to be a little bit careful when I talk about that kind of stuff. But when everyone on Twitter and people that I respect are going after after the offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, when they've said his scheme isn't conducive to Herbert's success, it means something, right? Like obviously, like, we shouldn't accept something to be true because the majority or the public is saying it's true. But when everyone is saying it and no one is coming from the other side giving me a reason to believe in him and the scheme it fits Herbert, there's a problem. And I think that's kind of ultimately where the Chargers offense is right now.
It's crazy because the echo you're putting out right there, it's pretty sentimental to a lot of Dolphins fans from the last year as well. Box score, advanced metrics, and eye test have all shown Justin Herbert is an exceptional quarterback. I mean, of course, these discussions are going to happen all the time, quote unquote. His play has dropped off this year, but his tape is still pretty good with some top level plays. No one really has actual criticisms of what he's doing right, and you said it yourself. It's the scheme. Um, Hooked up Joe, you have to model the scheme on your players, not try to get the players to model your scheme. It's not something that he's doing wrong. He's not missing reads. You poke a stick at, his 20th ranked EPA or his, I believe, 30th or 29th ranked ADOT. It might have changed from last week as well. Like, it's like, come on, like, do something. I mean, he's doing it. And, credit to our other podcast on the Five Reasons platform at 3 yards per carry. Freddie Artiaga pretty much noticed, when Herbert is scrambling, he's looking for the next receiver. He can't throw the deep ball because of the offensive line can't protect. He's dumping it off to Austin Eckler in the flats, things like that. On the other side of the coin is Tua. I mean, he took a tremendous, tremendous leap from year 2 to year 3. Yes, he's got the play caller. He's got somewhat of protection, even though I believe they're the 30th ranked composite offensive line in the league without Teron Armstead. He's got the playmakers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. He's got a play caller in Mike McDaniel that's scheming things. And, a lot of people are saying, the Dolphins wide receivers are running wide open. They look open, but when you're watching the film, you're seeing Tua and his eyes get there faster and throw the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds as well. So, I mean, it's looking like the coin has flipped for both of these quarterbacks. What are you seeing from Tua this season?
Yeah, I think, I was thinking about, like, obviously I knew we were going to have this discussion before. I was just thinking about like a good way to like really preface this. Like, typically we see, typically we question when a quarterback goes from really bad to good because we'd associate them to continue their bad play. When a quarterback goes from pretty good to pretty bad in terms of their stats and stuff, like, it's tough to really like understand why. But when a quarterback goes from bad to good, like, we've kind of talked, or Twitter's kind of made it seem that after year 2, we have a pretty good gauge of where a quarterback is in terms of their production, their efficiency, their play overall as a quarterback. And Tua's taken this massive leap, which again, you have to give him credit for. I've updated my prior since the beginning of the season, also because I'm not really trying to get into too many Twitter arguments with Tua on. But yeah, I mean, he's producing like a great quarterback. And the only thing that holds me back is just knowing that this scheme has also allowed guys like Jimmy G to rank top, in EPA per play. And also the fact that like the stretch where Tua was producing at an insane level, I give him the credit that his EPA, his yards per attempt, his any dot a, like any per attempt, like he was ranking number 1 in a ton of metrics, playing against some pretty bad pass defenses. But when I watched that Niners game over again, it wasn't the scheme that failed. It was Tua just had a bad day. And like I gave credit. We talked, privately on Sunday. Like, it was just that Tua was missing throws. It wasn't that the Dolphins were outcoached. It wasn't that receivers weren't running open or were being covered. It's just that Tua missed those throws. But, thankfully for Dolphins fans, now they're going against a Chargers defense that ranks 27th in EPA per play. They're bottom 8 in EPA per pass allowed. They can't stop the run. They can't get after the passer, and they just allowed Devontae Adams to have 177 yards on them, which
I
he's the only
know.
receiver on the Raiders team.
I know we talked a little bit about this matchup last week privately as well. Just talking about that 49ers game. I rewatched the film, and man, these 49ers linebackers, these dudes are freaking crazy, man. I was questioning some of the play calling as to, the game plan was, and from what was rumored in practice, is that Tua had to throw the ball a little bit deeper and high point the ball for these receivers to make these catches because these 49ers linebackers
Mhm.
are really good and really, really fast in coverage. You've got Dre Greenlaw, you have Azeez Al-Shaair, you have Fred Warner, who's probably one of the best coverage linebackers in terms of EPA per play and obviously in the NFL as well. I believe Nate Tice had a tweet out that had Fred Warner when he's out there in coverage in the middle of the field. The EPA per play is like zero point 0.1 for opposing quarterbacks. Tua has like a 0.74 EPA in the middle of the field with between 10 to 16, 10 to 19 yards throwing the intermediate. When I watched this game, there was really one drag and one underneath crossing route itself. I'll go ahead and find it. But when you watch this 49ers defense, they play a lot of palms. And that's basically kind of like cover two. The
Yeah.
corners are watching the flats. The safeties are up top as well. And the linebackers just manage the middle of the field. I saw a lot of space on the underneath the drag routes, the crossing routes as well. Like, go ahead and talk about that 49ers defense on and how they're just so good at everything and how they were a clear mismatch for this Dolphins offense.
Yeah, I think you hit on it perfect that the 49ers defense is built to take away the middle of the field. Next Gen Stats from the NFL office kind of put out a great article about that, how the Dolphins offense is like one of the best at targeting the middle of the field. The 49ers defense is the best at taking away the middle of the field. And when you have guys like Fred Warner and Hufunga, playing in those spaces, obviously you're going to be very good at that. Now, I admittedly am not like that much of a scheme guy, right? Like, and understanding the 49ers defense isn't something that like I'm too familiar with. But just thinking about how the 49ers compare to the Chargers, it's night and day, man. Because Derwin James is going to be out for this game. So, Chargers maybe had a fighting chance with Derwin James covering the middle of the field. But you're going from Fred Warner to Kenneth Murray. Kenneth Murray, who is might be the worst first round pick of the Tom Telesco era. Like, that guy is really bad. And I've been calling for him to be benched for weeks now for the Chargers backup Troy Reader, who I also watched get torched in coverage in the playoffs. Like, that's how bad the Chargers linebacker coverage is, right? And now Derwin James is out. And so who's covering the middle of the field? You have Kenneth Murray and Alohi Gilman. Alohi Gilman, who's been a perennial backup safety for every single year of his contract. The Chargers have no resistance to covering the middle of the field in this game. And one of the things I was looking at last night was when Tua throws, or the Dolphins in general, throw the ball over the middle and in the intermediate part of the field, 10 to 19 yards. They've had the eighth best EPA per play. I should have broken it down by Tua, not Tua, but I'm assuming it's going to be higher with Tua. The Chargers defense, when facing offenses that throw over the middle and in the intermediate part of the field, have the sixth worst defense this year. Now they're losing their best coverage player in total. I don't see how the Chargers defense is going to be able to do anything against this Dolphins offense that is going to be getting healthier with Teron Armstead back.
Teron Armstead may indeed be back, but the one thing, if I'm looking at the Chargers, is the secondary depth as well. You guys don't have Derwin James. You don't have
Bryce
who's
Callahan.
Bryce Callahan as you said on the tweet. 0.714 EPA per pass, throwing the ball over the middle and the intermediate rate. The Chargers defense almost one whole EPA per play allowed, sixth worst in the NFL. And then just talking about the run defense itself, it is really in the Dolphins offense favor overall. Now, as we move over, to the Chargers offense, what is this offense? What is Joe Lombardi doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it really is that he took the Saints playbook and tried to force Justin Herbert to do what Drew Brees did, which look, I understand the Saints offense was crazy efficient. It worked when Drew Brees was quarterback and when they had Michael Thomas healthy and stuff. But Justin Herbert isn't Drew Brees. Now, one of the things that's very tough to quantify or even like do film studies on is like mental processing, like reading the eyes. That's something that I've given Justin Herbert a lot of credit for. That's something Tua does very well, right? Like that's why like a great Tua comp has been like Drew Brees, that he reads the field very well. He's pretty accurate. He can go through his progressions. Justin Herbert does a good job of getting through his progressions, but the problem is the Chargers offense is so predicated on getting a first down. There's no goal to be explosive on offense. If you use, Marcus Mosher's explosive play table where they classify an explosive run as
Right.
10 plus yards and an explosive pass as 20 plus yards, the Chargers have the third least explosive plays in the NFL this year. It's so predicated on running. It's three basic concepts: stick, horizontal spacing, and like mesh or spot, where it's really just Joe Lombardi telling Josh Palmer or Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, go win a one-on-one matchup, and Justin Herbert throw an accurate ball. Now, the problem is defenses have picked up on this. You can see when defenses know Chargers are running curls or they're running, like an option route, they're playing the receiver. Like there's no fear of a double move. There's no fear of a go route because number one, the Chargers don't have the speed to beat anyone over the top. And number two, even if someone does beat a receiver over the top, the offensive line does not hold up for enough time. The Chargers this year have the second highest rate of quick pressures, which is defined as pressures in under 2.5 seconds. So thinking about how this applies to this game with Josh Boyer, who has blitzed at the third highest rate of any team in the NFL this year. I like, I just like I don't know what to expect. Even with Mike Williams back, like Mike Williams isn't a separator. Keenan Allen, if you've kept up with Twitter, everyone's calling him washed. I don't think he's been that good this year. He can't separate, and I know
I
you
I
have a.
I I
Sorry,
think when
go.
you talk about just separation overall, and there was a huge discussion on Dolphins Twitter just about can Devontae Parker separate at all? Can Lynn Bowden separate? You're talking about Keenan Allen not being able to separate. It's on the play caller, man. Like the receivers, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, they're running in the routes that's being called for them. Yes, they have their moves in there. Yes, they can dictate on what they want, and Herbert can also audible. But dude, the play caller Joe Lombardi has to do something. You have a player who can run those deep goes, who can run those hitches, the slants, the insides, the outsides, the post as well. And you're primarily lining up in 11 personnel as well. You have a .01 EPA per play. That is not good in your most base offense, just that 11 personnel overall. And you're passing 77% of the time. Something clearly is not working at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty evident that whatever Joe Lombardi's kind of been doing, it's not working, and yeah, it's the whole offense again is predicated on winning one-on-one matchups, which a healthy Keenan Allen before the season, I felt confident that he could do that. A Josh Palmer, who has, in my opinion, taken a step forward this year, can do that, but nothing's gone according to plan. And the thing is, when players get injured, when you have to start DeAndre Carter, a career punt returner, when you have to start Michael Bandy and expect them to win one-on-one matchups, there's no adjustment. There's no man beaters. There's no rub routes. Like it's all still go win a one-on-one matchup, even when you're starting practice squad guys, right? And that's kind of just been the big problem for me. And like I laid off like kind of criticizing Joe Lombardi because his offense was designed for a lot of people to be healthy, but now that we've seen that your team isn't healthy, where's the adjustments? Where's the fix? Like where's the play calling to scheme guys open instead of just saying go get open, right? Like that's the big thing, and that's ultimately where the Chargers offense has fallen short.
I mean, not only that, just the injuries on the offensive line as well. You don't have Corey Lindsley. Jamari Sawyer looks like Elton Jenkins next to his teammate as well. It's like you have Jesse Davis 2.0 and Austin Jackson when he was a rookie, and not to mention you're facing Jalen Phillips who has just such a really, really good sophomore season. You pair him up with Melvin
Mhm.
Ingram. Now you bring in Bradley Chubb. Both Chubb and Jalen Phillips are top 10 in pressure rates per ESPN's FPI index. And Melvin Ingram, he has one of the hardest assignments, but he's also effective in those snaps as well. Uh, with Chubb, what I've seen is that he's dropping into coverage. Jalen Phillips is dropping into coverage. Melvin Ingram is dropping into coverage. And
Mhm.
when we're talking about just those dump offs in the flats to Austin Eckler, one thing I've noticed, one thing that Alpha on the 3 yards per carry has noticed on film is that when Justin Herbert is scrambling, when he's being pressured, when he's moving out of the pocket, he's looking for Austin Eckler in those flants, on those screens, on those slants as well. And he's just dumping it off. So is basically the game plan for this Dolphins offense just tackle and wrap up Austin Eckler? Or can Herbert actually do something and throw it deep up against, a cornerback group of Xavier Howard, who's not playing well, Cater Kohu, who's an undrafted rookie, Brandon Jones is out, Javon Holland is playing single high most of the time, and tackling has been a big issue for the linebackers as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the thing with I know the big kind of shtick against Herbert is like, oh, he's checking it down so much. Like, why does Austin Eckler have 85 receptions? Well, it's because of two things. Number one, receivers don't get open down the field because number one, they're slow. And number two, Justin Herbert's timer is much lower than any quarterback's timer because he has a bad offensive line. And weirdly enough, these checkdowns, as people like to criticize them for, have a success rate over 50% this year. It's not like he's checking down and it's turning into a negative play, or a 3rd and 6 check down is turning into 4th and 4. Like, these checkdowns have been working. It's a successful play. So I don't want Herbert to go away from that, especially when most of the time, like, Austin Eckler is like your best player on the field, right? Like when Palmer, Bandy, and Carter were the receivers, Austin Eckler is the best skill position player you have. So it's not yet. In a sense, you're right. It is about stopping Austin Eckler in the flats. He is one of the better receiving backs. He's not a great rusher anymore. He's a great receiving back still. And so, I'm gonna guess you have like Jerome Baker on him or
Don't say
anyone.
Landon Roberts. Don't say Landon
Okay,
Roberts. Don't
okay.
say
I
Landon
I
Roberts.
yeah, I know Jerome Baker got the second contract, so that's the one I remembered. But yeah,
Yeah.
wrapping up, Austin Eckler is going to be key. But with how much the Dolphins blitz, I mean, I would be worried for the secondary, which I don't think has been that good this year. Right, like has had its moments, kind of being leaky. Did get torn up by Brock Purdy, which is something I wasn't expecting to say, but I don't know. I don't really know what to expect from this Chargers offense. But or to your point, I think stopping Austin Eckler is probably the first or second step in the Dolphins defense having success.
So stopping Austin Eckler, play man coverage, and rush the heck out of Justin Herbert. Those are going to be the three keys for the Dolphins defense to actually, really, really put pressure on Justin Herbert and the offense overall. One thing I did want to talk to you about is, and you actually asked me this question on Space for Take the Points with Arjun as well. You asked about the effectiveness of Tua with and without Tyreek Hill, or one of Tyreek Hill and one of Jalen Waddle, um, on and off the field. Jalen Waddle, for one, has not been playing up to par as what I've seen
Hmm.
compared to his rookie season.
Yeah.
He's dropping a lot. He's dropping balls. I mean, he dropped a couple balls in the San Francisco game. Tyreek Hill dropped a couple balls as well, but the drops is a little bit relevant to this game. As everyone's saying, oh, Tua is a yak thrower. The Dolphins are probably 20th best in yak in yards after the catch for their receivers. Tua's throwing past the sticks to those guys, but they're not churning. They're not getting up the field as much as they want to. And one thing with Waddle is that he's jumping on a lot of these balls. He's trying to jump catch these balls because Tua is
Hmm.
high pointing it, as a lot of defensive backs and linebackers are around the middle of the field. One thing I did see from your Twitter is best producing routes by receivers this
Yeah.
season. And I saw Jalen Waddle was the third best wide receiver in the post itself. He's ran 14 routes and has a total EPA of 18.25. I'll go ahead and, put it up on the screen. Can you go ahead and explain what this exactly means?
Yeah, so I mean, I should I think I do want to correct what you said. Like in terms of running post routes, no receiver has garnered more production than Jalen Waddle. So in post routes specifically, he's been the best. In terms of a receiver in a specific route, he's had the third best production running a single route, which is post routes. So again, that kind of ties into the Dolphins' success throwing over the middle, right? So they've generated over 40, around 44 points, expected points, throwing over the middle in the intermediate range. And Jalen Waddle running these post routes, I would say, has contributed to at least 18 of those expected points, right? So it kind of ties into what the Dolphins do well, which is space out the defense. Defenses having to gravitate towards Tyreek, which leaves Waddle in single coverage on the backside, and Tua's made some of those anticipatory throws at times this year, which is pretty it has been pretty good to watch at times. And again, I think that's probably going to continue this week, given the state of the Chargers coverage unit, given the state of how bad the Chargers linebackers are in coverage, and also the fact that the Chargers have zero pass rush, which going from the Niners all-star defensive line, which I had to watch, Justin Herbert go up against. And I thought for the most part, the Dolphins O-line did okay at kind of neutralizing them, but we did see Nick Bosa run free a couple times. That won't be an issue in this game because no one does anything outside of Khalil Mack. Sebastian Joseph Day is out for this game. The Chargers have no pass rush from the edge outside of Mack. There's no pass rush from the interior. I think Waddle over the middle is going to be fire. He's going to have a great day. Same with Tyreek. It's honestly pick your poison if you're two at this point.
It's honestly pick your poison. And you know what the crazy thing is? Yeah, Hooked Up Joe just mentioned it, and CBS Sports figured it out a little while ago. Jalen Waddle has he's number one in grabbing a first down and touchdown rate in the NFL
Yeah.
in his second season, better than Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs as well. The question of the day will be, though, Arjun, both of these running games are bad. Both of these running games are bad, and you can say it could be scheme, it could be O-line, but both of these teams are quick to abandon the run. Chargers ranked 31st, Dolphins coming in at 28th. The results have been mixed. Chargers are 4-5 of the 9 games Herbert has thrown the ball 35 plus times. They only ran the ball. The Dolphins only ran the ball 8 times against the San Francisco 49ers, when admittedly, I think they should have ran the ball much more. You said it yourself, with Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and a very leaky Chargers defense, that run game may be established for the Dolphins, but can you see them actually stopping Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert?
No, there's no way. This Chargers run defense allowed James Conner to run for 100 yards, and that was when they had Derwin James and Joseph Day healthy. There is I think I was looking at their player props earlier today, because I was gonna have a lot of props on the Dolphins overs in this game. Like Mostert is sitting at 46 and a half, 47 and a half. Wilson's at 41 and a half. It's like the Dolphins will be able to run the ball if they want to. The thing is, I don't think they should against this Chargers defense because as I talked about, there's no pass rush to be worried about. I understand your point about running the ball more in the Niners game because you want to slow down Nick Bosa. You don't want him to kind of just be going at Greg Little in these expected pass situations, right? But in this game against the Chargers, there's nothing to worry about. And teams have been able to pass the ball more efficiently on the Chargers than they have been able to run the ball. Now, the Dolphins will probably be able to salt the game away in the fourth quarter when they're playing with a lead and run the ball whenever they want. But in this game, they're going to be able to do whatever they want, passing or running. So I don't think it's optimal to give the ball to Wilson and Mostert 20 plus times. You can give it to them when you are in short down situations. You can give it to them if it was a long developing play and guys are tired. That's okay. But I don't think it's necessary for the Dolphins to quote unquote establish the run in this game because the Chargers defense can't really stop anything.
Established and run, that has been a hot topic in the analytics community. One more thing I wanted to talk about before we head over to our sponsor, Prize Picks, which does a lot of player props, is third down defense for both of these teams. The Dolphins are probably, well, when I looked at it last week, they were the 4th worst third down defense. Where do the Chargers rank in third down defense?
It's it's the most annoying thing just watching the Chargers play third down. play third down defense. Like, and when I was watching that Chiefs game, it was like the Chargers were getting Chiefs in third and long. Chiefs just kept going and kept converting. The Chargers struggle on third and long, on third down in general for two reasons. Number one, they can't generate a pass rush because Kyle Van Noy is washed. Chris Rumph is terrible, and they have this guy called Derek Tuska who shouldn't be on an NFL active roster, right? So whoever's going up against Armstead is going to get neutralized. But just in general, okay, so yeah, that's number one. They can't develop a pass rush. Number two, when when quarterbacks escape the pocket, the Chargers don't do a good job in these like type of scramble drills.
Oh,
There's
neither do the
always
Dolphins, man.
yeah.
Neither do the Dolphins.
I think part of the Dolphins' reason is because they do play man, right? While the Chargers kind of mix up man and zone on third down. I think they do play a little bit more man than they do zone, but the Chargers just can't really cover anyone. And again, now they're losing Bryce Callahan and Derwin James. It's like, I don't know. It's just like I already know what the
It's
outcome
just
of
a
these
bad mixture in the
yeah.
pot. And over there, you see on the screen, that's third down. That's a third down defense EPA per play. Miami UC is 20th, and the Chargers are 25th. And if you look at, the expected pass situations, overall, Miami is 20th. The Chargers are 27th. And you're talking about going up against a quarterback who's one of the best in the league in third down QBR, third down in the fourth quarter as well. I mean, he's made his name in the fourth quarter and third downs this year. And if you just talk about him winning these types of games, he's 15-3 over the last 17 games. Over the last
Yeah.
17 games, Tua is 15-3. Yes, could be because of playing in bad defenses, but he's coming up clutch in the big time. He's coming up clutch in the big time, and third downs obviously are going to be key up against, for both the Dolphins and the Chargers. Now, before we go into our predictions, wanted to highlight our sponsor, Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy simplified. Sign up now to claim your limited time offer in player props. You can take the over on Patrick Mahomes. You can take the under in Max Drew's three-pointers as well. Make sure you use the promo code 5 for Prize Picks. That's FIVE, kind of like Subway's $5 footlong as well. Now, here we have Richard. I think the Chargers' game plan will be to limit the total possessions of the game. Dolphins' defense struggles to get off the field, so that will benefit the Chargers who like to play first down at a time. And Richard's right. Last week up against the San Francisco 49ers, the Dolphins' defense was on the field for 81 plays. 81 plays.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Arjun, the Chargers, yes, they're throwing short of the sticks, but if they're able to convert on third down, as we talk about that Dolphins third down passing and rushing defense, it's going to be a long night for that Dolphins defense. So, do you agree with that point Richard made?
I mean, so here's the thing. Like it's weird because if you're playing as the underdog, you want to invite like variance. Like you don't want to do the things you typically do. So that means you like run the ball more. Like Richard said, you're kind of trying to limit total possessions. But I don't know. In this game, I just think the Chargers need to be as aggressive as possible. The Dolphins' weak point of their defense is their secondary. Like it's weird to say given Xavier Howard, Javon Hall, and Byron Jones, right? Like that's not something I was expecting, but it is the weak point of their defense because you're not going to be able to run the ball versus Phillips, versus
yeah, Byron Jones is still out. Byron Jones is still out.
Oh, okay, yeah. So regardless if he was in or out, the strong point of this Dolphins defense is their run defense, right? With Christian Wilkins and the guys I just mentioned. And Boyer loves to show those 7-6 guys on the line looks and then drop back into coverage. They're going to show heavy boxes. So I don't necessarily agree with the idea that you want to limit, possessions. It does make sense from like a defensive perspective because the Chargers defense isn't going to be able to stop shit. But in terms of the Chargers offense, like just move the ball. If you're moving the ball in chunk plays and you're you're adding more possessions to the game, then like screw it, right? Like who cares? Just move the ball. Do whatever you need to move the ball. And I think that's by passing. So passing is probably going to increase possessions, but that's fine. Like that's at this point, like that's what you need to do because your defense isn't going to get stops regardless. So I think at that point, you actually do want to increase possessions because you want to give Justin Herbert more chances to score, even if the Chargers offense hasn't been that good and they're getting somebody healthy back. I think it's about just letting Justin Herbert be successful in this game, which I think is done by passing the ball.
So the spread in this game is Dolphins -3. Money line for the Dolphins is -170. Chargers is plus 150. What do you see the game score being like, and how many passing yards does both Tua and Herbert get?
Yeah, so on last Sunday night, Dolphins money line -125 was my biggest bet of the entire season. That was like what the fake handicappers like to call like the whale McSlam, like whatever adjectives you want to say. I think the Dolphins win this game. I don't know if they win it by a lot because I wasn't expecting Corey Linsley and Mike Williams to come back. I do think they'll win though, and they'll have control of the game for the most part. But I do see it being a high scoring game. I think something like 35-28, 35-31, something in that range where the Dolphins offense is not going to be stopped. But the Chargers offense could surprise, right? Like I counted out Justin Herbert in the 49ers game thinking the Chargers offense wouldn't be able to do anything. And they came out scoring a touchdown on the first drive. Like Herbert in prime time, I think has done an okay job of like keeping the Chargers in games, even when they're kind of the underdog. So I definitely see the game go, or I shouldn't say definitely. I think the game will likely go over. And I think if I had to pick a side, I would go with Dolphins -3. I wouldn't take 3.5, but I think -3 is the right play for the Dolphins. I don't really, I like personally, I haven't heard a good handicap for why we should be betting the Chargers at all, like at all, honestly.
Well, I do think that the Dolphins will win, and this will be a bounce back game for Tua, just up against the Chargers defense as well. The Dolphins are 5-1 in their last 6 primetime games. Tua has shined in the primetime games, except for the Pittsburgh game where he was coming off the concussion and the injury and things like that. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I mean, you can't cover those guys playing up against that secondary, and there's no pass rush. There's no secondary help. He's gonna have time to throw
Yeah.
all day, and if he has time to throw all day, especially to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, um, Jasir Taylor versus Tyreek Hill. Can you?
No,
I don't think you want to
I'm not
imagine.
trying. That's a night. I'm not trying to imagine. That's like a nightmare scenario.
That's 100% a nightmare scenario. So Arjun, what's next for the Chargers if they don't make the playoffs?
I I don't really know. I think if they don't make the playoffs, something needs to change. Like I I don't really like I'm still kind of up in the air with what to do with the coaching staff. Like it's kind of obvious that the offensive scheme wasn't great this year, but how much of that is attributed to injuries and not having your all pro left tackle and your $20 million receivers? Like it's tough to really say what's going to happen. The Chargers, ownership group has typically given a longer leash to coaches. Anthony Lynn coached 4 years, Mike McCoy coached 4 years. Like I think Brandon Staley will probably get another year. Um, but the problem is the Chargers don't have any cap space. They spent all their money this offseason getting guys for Brandon Staley, and it hasn't really worked out in his vision. So it's tough to really say what's going to happen. I do think the Chargers next year should be somewhat competitive, but I'm personally done kind of anointing them and like putting them on this level of the Chiefs and like thinking they have a chance to compete. I'm going into next season with very low expectations for the Chargers.
Well, Richard, here, Chargers are in the situation the Dolphins were in last year. They may benefit in the long run from missing the playoffs. That was the best thing to happen to the Dolphins last year. Yes, it was in terms of a coaching change, free agency,
Yeah.
getting the players that they wanted as well. Well, Arjun and I both predict the Miami Dolphins to win Sunday Night Football in LA. Make sure you guys stay tuned in to the network for Heat coverage and Dolphins coverage. 3 Yards Per Carry just put out their preview episode today. We will have pregame and postgame as well right here on the Fire Reason Sports Network. Arjun, thank you so much for coming on, and everybody, fins up, baby.